Mike Milbury. If we're gonna talk about him, we need to talk about all of them, which means it's gonna be more than one video. That's why I'm wearing Bruins gear, because he played for the Bruins. He wore this jersey. This was the logo he wore, not that one. So technically, I got the wrong logo on the board because I don't have that one. But the difference between this one and that one is so minor, you didn't notice it till I pointed it out. He comes into the league without a lot of fanfare. He played in Colgate, and he was a letterman there, and highly regarded. I don't think he's an unintelligent man. I don't. I've lost him already. I'm kidding, kind of. 3 games played in 75-76, 9 penalty minutes. And the penalty minutes are on the board because Milbury played a very physical game, and he played in an era where there was a lot of rough and tumble players. 76-77, 6 goals, 18 assists, 166 penalty minutes. Pretty standard for him. 80 games played in 77-78, 8 goals, 30 assists, 151 penalty minutes. So Milbury accumulating the penalty minutes here at Gretzky-like numbers. 74 games in 78-79, a goal, 34 assists, 149 penalty minutes. But this is an era where Tiger Williams will set a record with over 300 penalty minutes, where it is not unusual to see players with over 200 penalty minutes. This was a totally different game than what we see now. 78-79, goal, 34 assists, 149 penalty minutes. 79-80, he kind of forgets to take penalties that year. 72 games played, 10 goals, 13 assists. He also gets double digits in goals for the only time in his career. 59 penalty minutes. So I guess he fashioned himself that year as a point man on the power play or something. Coached by Don Cherry. It's not a coincidence that those two guys are both a member of this Boston Bruins franchise, and that they're both points of interest with hockey fans right now when you talk about dinosaurs and all this stuff, right? So the fact that they were both Bruins at the time, not really a huge surprise. And it's the 70s. We're talking about 40 years ago at this stage. 80-81, he forgets how to score goals, but remembers the penalties. 77 games played, 0 goals, 18 assists, 222 penalty minutes. That is the highest he achieved in his career, and it made up for the 59 the year before. 81-82, 51 games played, 2 goals, 10 assists, 71 penalty minutes. 82-83, 78 games played, 9 goals, 15 assists, 24 points, 216 penalty minutes. 83-84, 74 games played. He only has 19 points that year because he's never an offensive player. He just isn't. He had the seasons in 77 and 78 where he had 38 and 35 points. Those were very, very good Bruins teams. A lot of scorers on those teams. So he would have had a lot of assists based on the fact that look who he played with, right? 84-85, 78 games played, 3 goals, 13 assists, 16 points. 152 penalty minutes. 85-86, only plays 22 games, has 7 points, still manages 102 penalty minutes. He retires after 86-87, 68 games played, 22 points, 96 penalty minutes. 754 tough games. Milbury played a tough game. His role was very physical. 49 goals, 189 assists, 238 points. I'm getting ahead of myself, right? 1,552 penalty minutes. Tough player. And when you play this way, you end up playing probably less games than you would have if you played a finesse game, like a Doug Jarvis type, right? Doug Jarvis being the all-time leader for consecutive games played. And when he set that record, I remember Don Cherry going off about how soft he was and how this record didn't mean anything. And he hadn't played a really tough game like Gary Younger. And I was like, okay. Couldn't just say congratulations. No. After he retires, he ends up going into coaching pretty darn quick. He's an assistant coach with Boston. He coaches in Maine in the American League. He ends up being named coach of the Boston Bruins to start the 89-90 season. 80 games played, 101 points that year. They go to the Stanley Cup Finals. And I remember thinking at the time, Milbury's a pretty good coach. And he was. He was a pretty decent coach for the Boston Bruins. 90-91, 80 games played, of course, because this is just the schedule. Can't get injured and say, oh, we're not going to play that game. 44, 24, and 12, 100 points. So both seasons he coaches the Bruins, they get to 100 points. The second year they go to the conference finals. Now, he generated some controversy that year, and we'll get into it. Not at this point, I just want to talk about his record. He doesn't end up back in the NHL as a coach until 95-96 with the Islanders. They play 82 games that season. 22 wins, 50 losses, 10 ties, 52 points. This is when the Islanders are really bad. And they're going to stay really bad for a while. But when I get into his GM record, which I will do in the second video, I'm going to do about Mike Milbury. This is just about him as a coach. This is about him as a player. Really, honestly, the Islanders were just a disaster. 45 games coached, 13, 23, and 9 record, and he's moved to the general manager role by the New York Islanders. 97-98, he comes in as a mid-season replacement. 19 games he coaches, 8, 9, and 2 record, 18 points. 98-99, 45 games coached by him, 13, 29, and 3, 29 points. And, during his time with the Islanders, there were two things. One, they wanted to turn things around, and two, they wanted to do it on the cheap. And then when they opened up the coffers and they started spending money, they didn't spend it wisely either. And I think with Milbury, the player, the coach, I honestly think he was decent at both jobs. I think as a player, I think as an enforcer, as a defensive defenseman, he was solid. As a coach, he proved in Boston with a good roster, he can get them to the playoffs and he can get them through at least 3 rounds and sometimes 4. In a bad situation in New York, it didn't work as well. And I don't think, as a GM, I just don't think it was ever a great fit. But that, again, is for the next video. Now, as Bruins coach in 1991, he is the All-Star Game coach. They went to the Stanley Cup final the year before. There you go. You're now the All-Star Game coach. He named Chris Nyland and Brian Skrudland to the All-Star team in over Kirk Muller and an unretired Guy Lafleur. He was lucky. Neither Chris Nyland nor Brian Skrudland were healthy enough to be in the All-Star game, so the roster got fixed. But the NHL looked at this and said, what? So they changed the policy so that the coach no longer named the All-Star team. So Milbury actually plays a role in changing how things work with the NHL. And it's not the only time he would do that. There's actually times where he changes it for the good by accident, and then there's a time where he changes it for the good on purpose. And that's where it gets weird. It is not, at this point, though, either through the All-Star Game or December 23rd, 1979. I was 6. So no, I do not remember this incident. No, I did not watch hockey at that point in time. I wasn't a Bruins fan yet. No. So this is an incident that if it took place now, oh boy, you'd see guys booted out of the league. And I don't mean suspended for a season. I think you'd see guys ejected. But it starts with the fact that a Rangers fan is able to reach a Bruins player. So in framing this is at a point where if I, as a drunken idiot fan, want to, I can reach over the glass and smack a player upside the head if I want to. It's not a good look. Now, I might need some help to get there, but the fact that it's even possible, it's bad for hockey. And this is before, when you see those canopies players come out through? The Flyers in the 80s, I think, made that happen. Flyers fans in the 80s rained garbage down on opposing players so much that canopies had to get put in. I'm pretty sure that's where it came from, because that's what sticks out to me from when I was a kid. I know it wasn't just Philly, but it looked ugly in Philly. December 23rd, 1979, Milbury plays a role in the NHL changing something again. So the Rangers fan is able to cut Stan Jonathan's face with a rolled-up program. I'm impressed that a rolled-up program can cut Stan Jonathan's face. I am also impressed at the sheer stupidity of the fan messing with Stan Jonathan You just don't do that. And you don't do that with the big bad Bruins of the late 70s either. Terry O'Reilly's the first one over the glass. So Jonathan, who got cut, isn't the first one into the crowd. Terry O'Reilly is. And O'Reilly, he was pretty tough too. And he could score. Terry O'Reilly was a double threat. He could beat you with his fists. He could beat you with his hands. He was fantastic. That being said, if almost any of these guys on this Bruins team played hockey right now, fans would be whining and crying about how cheap they are and how dirty they are. Oh, how dare they? It was a different game back then. Broad Street Bullies changed things, and the Bruins adapted pretty darn quick. Milbury had actually left the ice. So Milbury was all the way to the visiting dressing room. And then here's what's going on. Races back out on the ice. Joins his teammates in the stands. And catches the spectator who hit Jonathan in the face. I have to admit, that's kind of impressive. Removes the gentleman's shoe. And I assume while asking, did you drop this? Grabbing the heel end, smacked him upside the head with it. And this is the incident that gets brought up a ton. I guarantee you that Bruins fans, his teammates, saw him as a hero at the time for smacking the guy with his own shoe. Before he was restrained. So he only got to smack him once. It's not like he beat him to death with it. The incident does kind of get probably blown up a little bit. But on the other hand, they went into the crowd. So it didn't. So it's kind of both. He was suspended 6 games and fined $500. I just, I want you guys to marinate on that for a bit, okay? He got suspended 6 games. Terry O'Reilly, I believe, got 8, and Stan Jonathan got 6. He got suspended 6 games for going over the glass into the crowd and assaulting a fan. And the argument would be, well, he started it, which has never been a defense, either as a hockey player or as a parent. I don't care who started it because I'm finishing it. If only I had a dime for every time I've said that as a parent. The NHL changes things again because of, in part, Milbury. Okay, it's not all Milbury. We remember him because he takes guy's shoe and, did you drop this? But the NHL raised the glass so that this was stupid. Anyways, the NHL always changes things after. It's something so simple. It's sort of like players should wear helmets, but we'll wait almost 80 years into the league's existence before we make it mandatory. Because guys really like how the air flows through their hair while they're flying around the ice. And then the blood just flows freely from their head when they fall down. They like that more than feeling the impact of the helmet. It's not a smart league, is what I'm saying. It's getting better, but there's some intelligence that the NHL lacks in certain areas, and I've talked about that on this channel before. 1994. This is an interesting little incident. He's named as head coach at Boston College. But being Milbury, he quits before he starts. Before he's coached his first game, he cites fundamental differences between himself and the people running the program, and he quits. So that's in between coaching the Bruins and coaching the Islanders. But now we get into where Milbury's a hero, not Boston College. They didn't retire his number at Boston College. That's not a thing. As far as I know, no number of Mike Milbury's has been retired anywhere. Not that he didn't put up a lot of penalty minutes with Boston, but they don't retire your jersey number for that. Milbury was a hero for the NHLPA. Yep. He argued that players should be able to freely move between teams at a time when you didn't talk about that. Well, if I'm making $800,000 with Boston and I get offered $900,000 by Detroit, why shouldn't I go to Detroit? Was his argument. He was in favor of the free agency we see now in the NHL. And this was when Alan Eagleson was running the NHLPA. Now, Alan Eagleson's a piece of work. And I can do a video on Alan Eagleson, and eventually when I go through all the books on there and I get some Alan Eagleson stuff together, there will be an Alan Eagleson video, because he was horrible. He did get players money, but he skimmed off a lot for himself. And there was a lot of fake concern he would have with players. He wasn't a good person. And because he did some good things, there are people that will bring those up and try to forget about all the other stuff. I didn't mean to say shoe. Sorry, Mike. Ed Kia suffers a horrible injury in the American League. It's ending his career. Horrible, horrible, horrible injury. So you get compensated, right? The NHLPA with the money to compensate him. What does Alan Eagleson say? He says, well, it was a minor league injury. We don't need to compensate him. Didn't happen in the NHL. Mike Milbury, very, very vocal member of the NHLPA, says this is wrong. This is an NHLPA member who was in the American League at the time, who's out cold on the ice from a brutal-looking head injury, likely to never play again. Ed Kia is not a well-known name anywhere. Didn't make a ton of money in hockey. He's done. We've got to pay the man. And Eagleson is, I'd rather not. So this is kind of where the dark side of Alan Eagleson becomes very apparent. He doesn't want to spend the money. Even though it's the NHLPA's money, it's kind of his money. And Milbury's calling him out on it. So when Eagleson falls, and he does, he's his own worst enemy, Milbury's not sad to see him go out the door. So while we can talk a lot about Milbury, and we will, this may end up being a three-parter. I realized that I had enough material with him as a player and as a coach and things that happened that I could do a video on just that. But general manager and him as a broadcaster, that may end up being three parts. Because it's really a story of an evolution. You could call it a de-evolution if you want and have fun with it that way. But it's not all bad with Milbury. Not yet. And for this, he should be applauded. For this incident. What was John Ziegler's 6 games? Anyways, can you imagine that now? Tom Wilson even looks over the glass. Climbs the glass and just looks at fans. He's getting 10. I don't, yeah. Anyways, that's how things have changed. And you have to look at this background as a framework for what he says now. For when he says, well, what happened with Volkov was an unfortunate incident. Pardon? So when you're looking at some of the things that he says, it is you have to take it with a grain of salt. No, not Volkov, Voinov. Voinov as an unfortunate incident, and we'll get to that. That's I'm like, wait, not Volkov. Voinov, unfortunate incident. Alex Voinov. And again, it's a backdrop of this. This is a completely different league than the one you watch now. This, especially up in here. Okay, it's a free-for-all here. It turns into the Gretzky era here. There's still a lot of fighting, though. But there's a lot of goal scoring to kind of distract you from all the fighting that's going on, too. But he came along at the Broad Street Bullies era. And that's kind of what he was in. I can only imagine the things he saw as a player, as a coach. I'm sure there are a lot of secrets he'll take to his grave of things he saw as a player and as a coach. But I wanted to give you guys the background. I wanted to give you guys the picture of the man that he was 40 years ago before we get into his general manager record and before we get into his work as an analyst and some of the things that have happened and have been said by the man himself. So there you go. This is the start of a Mike Milbury series of sorts. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below as always. Again, I want this to be fair. I can't just throw a video up and go, there you go. Let's all have a laugh, because I think that oversimplifies it. So, part 1, let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video, and hey, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.